Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, of all the 50 states, guess where Arkansas ranks in terms of the stroke death rate?
Up there.
We're number one. We're the highest death rate in the country. We're number one. No, we're number one. We're number one. We're number one. Now we want to be number one, Phil, with certain things like Razorback football. When it comes to stroke and death rate, no, not so much. But stroke is no joke. In the next few minutes, you're going to hear some things that can help save your life or the life of someone that you know. Do you know anyone that's had a stroke? See a lot of heads nodding. I'll never forget when I was 8 years old and I was with my twin brother Rich. Remember the Atari 2600? I was playing Atari and I was having fun. And my dad comes in. If you were there, you would have heard this sort of conversation. David, I have to talk to you. Richard, I have to talk to you. Dad, I'm kind of busy right now. It's important. All right, what is it? My dad started to cry, and I found out that my grandmother had died. And I love my grandmother very much, and she died of a stroke. I'm really proud that I'm involved in the Arkansas Stroke Registry. I'm managing it. You might have heard of it. We're helping to reduce stroke in our state. You might be wondering, what is a registry? It's basically a database that we're filling with data from hospitals around the state so that we can see if hospitals are doing a good job when it comes to treating stroke patients. The Stroke Registry. I'm probably the least likely person in this room to be the Stroke Registry manager. I didn't know anything about stroke. I've been reading a book called Stroke for Dummies. You ever read those For Dummies books? But actually, I'll tell you, those books are good. The person that wrote this book is a physician. He did a great comparison. You've heard of a heart attack. We know a heart attack where blood gets cut off to the heart, so part of the heart dies. A stroke is where part of the brain dies because the blood cannot get to the brain, whether it's from a clot in the blood, in an artery, or whether it's from an artery that bursts. So if the brain cannot get oxygen from the blood and nutrients, part of the brain dies. So a stroke, think of it as a brain attack. You may have heard these statistics of stroke. It just blew me away. Did you know around the world, 6 million people every year die of stroke? 1 in 6 people will have a stroke sometime in their life. Look around the room. That's several of us. Every 6 seconds, someone dies of a stroke. Just overwhelming the impact stroke has had on our planet. And when you think of stroke, the word stroke, think of the word stroke. Like a stroke of luck, a stroke of a golf club. It's like a sudden or swift action. That's the definition of stroke. And just like a stroke is sudden, it needs to be treated very quickly. There's a treatment for stroke. Most strokes are caused by clots. And if you're having a stroke, it's critical you get to the hospital right away because there's a clot-busting drug that can bust that clot, blood will go back to the brain, you won't have any long-term effects. The key thing is go quickly to the hospital. Remember, time is brain. Time is brain. The faster you get to the hospital, the more brain you can save. Strokes are actually highly preventable. In fact, 80% of strokes, according to the National Stroke Association, are preventable. There's a key thing to remember, though. It's very simple. Remember your ABCs. Remember our ABCs. ABCs. A, think of A as aspirin. Aspirin acts as a blood thinner. When blood is thin, it's unlikely to clot, less likely for stroke. Aspirin. B is blood pressure. Is your blood pressure controlled? Do you know what your blood pressure is? if your blood pressure is out of control, and imagine it hitting against the artery over and over again, that can cause a burst. That can cause a stroke. Very important to keep your blood pressure under control. Cholesterol is C. What's your cholesterol? Do you know what your cholesterol is? Is it normal? If cholesterol is uncontrolled, it can form in your artery plaque. Atherosclerosis, meaning hardening of the arteries. Jason knows what that is. He went to medical school. Basically, your artery carries blood to the brain. Imagine it getting narrower and narrower from plaque. That facilitates clotting, which can lead to a stroke. Very important to keep your blood pressure, cholesterol under control. We know diet, exercise, we have the code cracked. We just need to follow the procedures to prevent stroke. And probably the most significant risk factor of stroke when it comes to preventable risk factors, controllable, is smoking. Do you smoke? Suzanne. No smoking from Suzanne. Smoking doubles your risk of stroke. It hardens the arteries, damages blood vessels. Don't smoke. No concern in the back of the room there. So now you've heard about what prevents a stroke. But what about how do you recognize a stroke? Because a heart attack, you've seen Fred Sanford, he's got the, I'm coming to join you, honey, right? And he's got his pain with a heart attack. You feel chest pain. With a stroke, you're probably not going to feel any pain. So how do you know if you're having a stroke? There's another acronym. In fact, you're going to be receiving a handout in a second. There's a good acronym. Remember this. FAST. F-A-S-T. F-A-S-T. F stands for face. Touch your face right now. Just touch your face. If you see somebody you think might be having a stroke, ask that person to smile. If their smile looks uneven, that could indicate a stroke. F is face. A is arms. Raise your arms. Raise both your arms in front of you like this. Ask someone to raise his or her arms if you think they're having a stroke. If one arm is slightly going down, that could indicate a stroke. A is arms. S is speech. Start talking. Say anything. Just start talking right now.
Hello, Dave. How are you?
Hey, Phil. Good to see you. Good to see you right now. You like my speech so far?
I do. It's great.
Speech. Ask that person to talk. Ask someone to talk. And if it doesn't make sense, like William's not making sense right now, that might be a stroke. But really, but seriously, if the speech doesn't make sense, it could be a stroke. And if you're seeing any of those signs, remember T. T and fast. T is time. Time is of the essence. Go quickly. Don't hesitate to go to the emergency room. Call 911. Whether it's you or someone you see might be having a stroke. We've got about 2 minutes left for questions. Be happy to take your questions.
Dave, why is Arkansas the #1? And why do we continue to hold that record?
That's a great question. No one has actually completely studied that. That's part of the purpose of our stroke registry, to collect the data so we can tell. However, we know that Arkansas has much higher smoking rates than other states. I've seen the national average. Arkansas is well above the national average on smoking. We know our diet is not very good in Arkansas compared to other states. In fact, not only Arkansas, but the states surrounding Arkansas. You've probably heard of the stroke belt. We don't get as much exercise in Arkansas. But probably one of the biggest factors as well is access to hospitals. In Little Rock, we've got access. But if you've been outside Little Rock to some of the rural counties, imagine having a stroke, you're transferred to a hospital, but there's no neurologists. Neurologists are the doctors that treat the brain. And if they can't diagnose your stroke because they can't treat you, what do they do with you? They transfer you. Now, what happens when they transfer you? That's costing time. And as you know, time is brain. So the fact of access, however, that's being worked on. There's actually a video conference system now in place in Arkansas where neurologists can get together. Out of time for questions. You've heard today about how to prevent stroke. You've heard about how to recognize stroke. Remember, time is brain. Don't hesitate. And there's a quotation, if you're having a stroke. On the beaches of hesitation lie the bleached bones of those who at the moment of victory rested, and in resting, lost all. Don't hesitate, Mr. Toastmaster.